What answer are they giving me that will best serve and my audience will get the most value of? Because that's important in a podcasting space. We are podcasters sharing a message. But the second thing that's important is the words that they are saying help guide me to closer to a sale or further away from a sale.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It is your host, Adam A. Adams, and we've got an interview today. Doug Sandler, who is, I don't even know what to call him. If you have...
Just don't call me an asshole.
If you got 8 or more podcasts, there's probably something wrong with you. I'll just start right there. Doug's got a few, and we'll talk a little bit about them. One of which is about business. So if you're listening now, you probably enjoy checking out that podcast, but I'll name 2 of his other podcasts real quick, which one of them, he's got a background right now, which if you're listening, obviously you won't be able to see what's happening on the screen, and that's all good. On his background, he's got this old, what is it, a 65 or 67 Mustang?
65 Mustang convertible.
And he also made a podcast about Mustangs, and it's, I guess he's 100 episodes in. He has another one, Something to Whine About. And so before we get into the content, to the listener, you're going to get value. Just Adam's going to take this quick rabbit hole and learn about something to whine about. This is another one of Doug's podcasts.
Look, you talk about taking a passion project and take it to the next level. If you want to write off, start a podcast, because now all of a sudden you have this great opportunity to write off all of the stuff. So every bottle of the 250 or 300 bottles of wine that we have, every wine trip that we take to Napa and to Sonoma, and I live about 2.5 hours south of Paso Robles. So every trip that I take to Paso, my girlfriend just started a wine label. So we started this show. It's called Something to Whine About. And it literally is, it's me and 2 buddies. My girlfriend is one of the buddies, and a good friend of mine, Michael Neeley. And we just visit wineries, talk to the winemakers, talk to the people that are in the know in the wine industry. And I'm like the layman's approach. I'm like, this wine tastes very grape forward. So it's like, I don't know anything about wine other than I know what I like. And I have learned a lot about wine doing the 80 or 90 or whatever episodes of that show. But it taught me a valuable lesson. And lesson is, man, you can create a podcast pretty much about anything and talk about monetization or capacity to write something off. You can do it using your podcast as the tool. That the show I started about my Mustang is a great example. All the repairs, everything that I put in the car, any trips that I take using the car, I get it hired out for photo shoots as a result. I mean, all of these things that I've been able to do with both of these passions that I have in my old car and my old truck and my wine drinking podcast. And this is even completely unrelated to my business, which is podcast production, coaching, and strategy. So it's very fun to do all of this, as I'm sure you know, Adam, from being in the same world.
I love that I quoted you, and I want the listener to write it down as well. If you want a write-off, start a podcast.
Totally.
That's pretty cool, because I was in Napa and Sonoma just last summer, and it was quite expensive. Every wine tasting was expensive. I mean, some of them might have been $75, some of them like $400.
Hey, imagine getting all of those wine tastings not only free, but then getting bottles of wine on top of that, because they want you to try their wine, and they want and this was even before we had a show launched. If you approach something with confidence, they will present. If you treat it like a hobby, you will get hobby results. Treat it like a business and you will get business results. And that podcast is a great example of that. We could have gone in and said, oh, we have a brand new podcast. Well, we'd love to interview you. We're hoping that you'll be part. And that's a way to whimper your way to success. It's a long tail approach to success in podcasting. You own a freaking media company. Treat it like that.
Yeah. Another quote, you own a freaking media company. Treat it like that. Or what was the other quote? If you want, what did you say? If you want
hobby results,
treat it like
if you want hobby results, treat it like a hobby. If you want business results, treat it like a business. And I look at podcasting as a means to an end. It's great. I don't want to be a podcaster necessarily. I mean, I love podcasting, but I didn't want to grow up and be a podcaster. I wanted all of the things that were attached to podcasts, but I didn't even realize what a podcast was, or even the vehicle was podcasting. Yeah. So whether your passion projects is in plumbing, in accounting, in SaaS, software as a service, podcasting, or the creation of water bottles, it doesn't really matter what your passion is. Whatever your passion is, create a podcast around that passion, you will find people that want to. We talk about radio as broadcasting. In podcasting, you want to actually narrowcast, which I heard you share that type of information, but the term that's either coined or I created or somebody else created it is this narrowcast. The smaller your audience, actually, the better, because now I can talk to a specific listener about what I want. My Ford Mustang show only appeals to those that love 65, 66, and 67 Mustangs. And now think about the audience in general. 99% of my people that listen to the show are male, and they're probably between the ages of 55 to 80. So it's like, okay, now I can go to a cigar group. I could go to whoever else would appeal to that market and say, I have got the dialed in market. The beauty of that market, I create a call to action on my general business show. I might get a 0.1% response, but I create a call to action on my Mustang show with 1,000 listeners every episode. I'll get 200 to 300 people opt into something. That's a 20 to 30% opt-in as opposed to a 0.2 or a 0.3% opt-in on a normal call to action. Sorry, I know I'm all over the place, but I get so excited about this subject, man. I love talking about it.
That's really good. So I'll say a couple things and then ask you a question.
Do it, man.
One is that I was looking at something to whine about, and you had published just a few days ago. So you're keeping that active. Sounds like you're keeping the one about the Mustangs active.
Yep.
It sounds like you're keeping a bunch of them active. How many do you have that are active? First and foremost.
Yeah, probably 8.
I got a follow-up question. 8.
Probably 8.
So he's crazy, everyone. So you got 8 active podcasts. I'm wondering, like, how do you do it? Because the listener is probably on their first podcast. They may have been doing it for like 2 years or less, or they're about to launch it, but their head is wrapped around how, quote, difficult, how, quote, much time one podcast is going to take them. And so systems and procedures is really where I want to take this.
Yeah.
How do you get 8 up and running and active and still going? You said one of them was at 90 episodes, one of them was at 100. I don't know where all of them are, but sounds like you're keeping a lot of them active. So how do we maintain that and sustain that?
Okay. So first of all, podcasts are like potato chips. You can't just have one, because you are going to get to a point where you say, I've done this. I'm good at this. I've put in my 10,000 hours at this. Let's create another one. If I can have another one that's as successful or relatively as successful as the first one, why not start a second one? And so the thing that you said, which is really the key, is the processes, the systems, and the procedures you have in place. If you don't have a system in place, and if you don't stay in your zone of genius, if you're not giving back to the world the gift that you have been given by the world, by the universe, if you try to do things like editing and show notes and distribution and marketing and social media on your own, you're going to drive yourself crazy. If you don't hire a guy like Adam, and this isn't a commercial for Adam or a commercial for me, but if you don't hire a company like Adam's, find somebody that actually loves that. That's their passion. My partner and I started this business, this podcast production business, because we liked all of the components. And then we realized I'm really horrible at accounting, and I'm really horrible at editing, and I'm really horrible at show notes writing. Let's bring people in that do that. And when I got really good at understanding the stuff that is my gift that I am supposed to share with the world, I got out of the business of editing and production and show notes and hired people to do that for me. And I'm like, hey, if I can do this for me, I love business. Why don't we see if other people want to do this too? And so we built a business, and we got 5 clients, and then we had 10 clients. And by the time we launched and produced 300 shows, I'm like, we know what we're doing. We've got this dialed in. Why don't we go about the stuff that we really love doing, which is creating the content? And so for those in your listening audience, for your community, my big takeaway would be, man, I'm just going to spend time focused on doing what I do best, which is creating the content. Let somebody else worry about the systems, or let somebody else create the system, and then adhere to the system and get your ass out of the system. When you see you're doing stuff that is not in your zone of genius, you're going to spend too much time and not make any money doing it.
Well, let me find out. And by the way, I really loved what you shared with the listener there. I'm still curious on, even though if you get the systems, the processes, the people, in place where you got somebody else editing it, writing the show notes for you because you don't want to or you don't think you're good at it. And that way you can focus on your zone of genius for you that's producing the content. Wanted to find out, like, how much time do you spend if you've got 8 different podcasts going per week to keep them all maintained?
So let's just talk about a few of the shows. The number one show that we have is called The Nice Guys on Business. We have almost 1,400 episodes of that show. It's been around for 8 years, and we do 2 episodes a week. And at our busiest, we were doing 5 episodes a week of that show. So the way that I'm able to maintain the capacity to do that is I spend very little time, which is an essential component in success in podcasting. Don't spend 4 hours on a 30-minute interview. If I were to interview you, which I'm going tomorrow, I know a little bit about you because I've had an opportunity to listen to a couple of episodes because I'm a podcaster. I like listening to podcasts. So I've heard enough to know what I think that your vibe is and the direction that you go with your business. So why do I need to spend 4 hours of time or even an hour of time? I literally can spend 10 minutes before an interview preparing for that interview and feel like I'm arriving at the interview with enough curiosity to share enough content to have my listeners that are in my community be pulled through the interview and enjoy the interview and then want to take action based upon your expertise, which is your zone of genius, and that call to action that you're going to create for my podcast tomorrow when we do this interview again. So for me, a 30-minute interview is about a 35-minute from beginning to end life cycle of how much time I spend with that potential guest or that guest.
Yeah. Question about thank you. And question about the Nice Guys podcast. Is it Nice Guys on Business or is it Nice Guys or is there 2 different ones? And the reason I'm asking is because I see it in different places listed in a different way.
So it's the Nice Guys on Business. We use it as our anchor show, the show that pulls all of our businesses together. You know, I mentioned the Mustang podcast and the Something to Whine About, my Ford Truck podcast and my Women, Men, and Relationships podcast and my BizWiz podcast and my SetX podcast. I mentioned all of those using the Nice Guys on Business as the anchor. So I think that that's the hub on the wheel rather than a spoke on the wheel of many podcasts.
Yes. Quick question, random question. You mentioned one about relationships. So when you go on a date with your girlfriend, is that always write-offable since you've got a podcast on it?
It's interesting. She has a podcast also, many podcasts, but she has one that's called Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. And I'm a co-host on that show. So she drives all of the content on that. So I just show up with my argument ready to go because she's got a different perspective on many things, but she's in the self-help, life coach, strategy world of building better relationships through, building better business through building better relationships.
Cool. So still know the answer to this question. Is it all write-offable?
I don't know. I would advise anybody that's in your audience taking tax advice from me to actually check with their tax attorney. For me, if we have a conversation about business during dinner or during drinks, I would say that would probably be, we would be inclined to write that off. But I let my accountant, again, zone of genius, accounting is not my thing. I put it on my business credit card. My accountant says that's a distribution as opposed to that's a write-off. So I don't really care. I don't really know. It's just at the end of the year, we have money in the bank. So that's good to know.
Cool. So you mentioned 8 years that you've been doing that one?
Yeah, we started the Nice Guys on Business in February of 2015.
And how many episodes? Because it was a lot.
14. We're just about to tick over 1,400. We were in the beginning, 1 episode a week. Then we went to 2, and then we went to 5, and then we went down to 3, and now we've leveled off at 2, where we've been for the last several years.
Can I ask, because I think that the listener might be curious about that. Why start with 1? Why move it up to 2? Why go all the way up to 5? Why come back down? What were kind of like the thought processes? And I would actually ask on each step, what was the thought process of starting with 1?
Yeah.
What was the thought process of doubling it and then adding more than double and then going back down and then going back down?
So before I answer that, let me talk just for a quick moment about the 3 reasons that people get started in podcasting. People get started podcasting because they either want to grow their community, they want to build their influence, or they want to make money. Now, they're all 3 byproducts of each other. If you approach podcasting with the desire to build community, you are going to make money because they're going to ask you for shit. You're also going to, if you want to be an influencer, you're going to hang out with other influencers that do the same thing. And so thereby you're going to grow a community and you're going to make money because people are going to want to partner with you. So the thing that I always tell my clients when we get started podcasting and in the coaching side of the business is which one of those is your lead strategy. Depending on your lead strategy and depending on how quickly you want to get there, ramp up, it's going to help dictate how many episodes that we're going to do a week. We had no clue in the beginning what we even wanted. We didn't even know that these three things existed. We created this community, influence, and money idea, the three pillars of why people get started podcasting. It took us about 2 years to figure that out. And then it took us another year probably to develop the strategies around each one of those three ideas of why people get started podcasting. So the reason we went to 5 episodes a week, from starting at 1, going to probably 2, then into 3, and then up to 5, and then back down to 2 again, eventually, was because I considered monetization was the essential component. That was the lifeblood that I needed in order to jump out of my day gig. And I spent, this is the little known fact that people won't know about me. Even if you didn't know me, you might not even be able to find this unless you really look hard. I spent 30 years as a bar mitzvah DJ. So for me, doing 2,100 gigs over the course of 30 years, it got a little tiring. And so I was figuring out in 2013, when I started podcasting, the idea of writing a book and then into podcasting, I needed an exit strategy from this DJ business because I was doing 100 gigs a year. And so the income that was created from this bar mitzvah business was hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And you just can't step into another career and do something like that. So I'm like, all right, what's our strategy going to be? All right, I'm going to write a book. I write a book about customer service because that's where I excelled in the DJ business, not at showing up and doing the gig, but customer service. And so I'm going to write this book. And then I'm like, how am I going to promote this book? Well, I guess I could hire a publicist or a publisher to help me, but they want like $3,500, $5,000 a month to promote my book. I'm like, nah, I don't need that. Why don't I just start a podcast? That'll be easy. That'll sell a lot of books. And when it didn't sell a lot of books, but one person in my audience said, hey, look, I love the idea of what you're talking about on the show, but could you teach me, instead of that stuff, could you teach me how to launch a podcast? And that was the first of 300 clients that we had launched. And it took about 2 years to figure out that strategy. But then I discovered if one person in my audience wants to start a podcast, maybe more people in my audience want to start a podcast. And then I kept thinking, well, what's the better way to get more content out to the world? All right, let's ramp up our episodes. So we went to 5 episodes a week, and then I discovered more people in my audience. And then I discovered the hidden component, and we can talk about this later too if you want, is that the gold in podcasting is not actually sharing a message with an anonymous community that will jump out of an anonymity and buy what you have. The gold in podcasting is actually the hidden gem of podcasting, and that is the relationships that you build with the people that are sitting in the guest seat. Those people are either going to become clients, they're going to become referral sources, they're going to become affiliates, they're going to become JV partners, or they're going to become that wild card, that person that I think, God, I don't know where they fit into my world, but man, that was a freaking great conversation. We've got to figure out how we can do something together. And so those 5 things out of the guest seat became gold for me. So why would I open up my microphone 5 days a week? Because every time I opened up this microphone, there was an opportunity to make between $5,000 and $10,000. How often would you want to open up a microphone if 5 to 10 grand was coming to you when you opened it up?
3 times a day.
Yeah, exactly. So there was no concern over I'm not going to be able to keep up with his workflow, because the money was coming in faster than we could count it, and more customers were coming in faster than we could get it. And that, for a short period of time, really blinded my vision, because I was taking every check that came in the door, good and bad. You know, that was a good thing and a bad thing. I was working myself to death, and I'm like, we can't freaking keep up this pace anymore. We've got to pull the volume back and be more selective, and then charge a higher amount, be less of a supply, more of a demand. Instead of charging $1,500 for something, we were charging $10,000 or $15,000 for something. Yeah, a lot of people self-eliminated because they're like, we can't afford that. But there were people that could afford it. And now I was doing 5 to 10 times the amount of income with a 5 to 20% of the effort that was put into it. And that's when we're like, okay, we know our market, we know our offer, and we know our message. So I call it getting to know your mom, your market, your offer, and your message. And it was like, oh, now we got our market, we've got our offer, and we've got our message. We know exactly who to go after. We know exactly how to put them in the guest seat, and we know exactly the questions to ask them to turn them into clients. Who wouldn't want that as a part of their business plan?
Yeah. Well, I got so many questions for you, and it's tough to narrow down on the next one. But
that's why we have a show tomorrow, too.
What I am curious about is if there's any thing that you can share with the listener if they are going through the process right now of pricing their service, their offer, pricing what they're doing? Like, how do you know if it's too high? How do you know if it's too low? And it sounds like you've had some experience with that, especially when you mentioned that something that you would have charged $1,500 for, or somebody else would charge $1,500 for, you moved it to $10,000 or $15,000. Should we be each kind of be thinking about raising our prices or lowering our prices? And I guess just how do we think about that?
Sure. Great question. So the things that come most easily to us are generally the gifts that we have to give back to the world, which are the things that we value the least. So something that comes easy to you, whether it's marketing or advertising or selling or whatever, I feel like I'm a good salesperson. I don't feel like I'm a sleazy sales guy. I feel like I'm a person that really wants to help somebody that's directly across the selling table from me. And I feel like I build a relationship with them. So for me, like, that comes easy. I can't imagine why it doesn't come easy for everybody, but it doesn't come easy. So for me to train somebody in the world of selling would come easy for me, but it's received, it doesn't come easy for everyone. So those that want those services, I may be less likely in the beginning to charge a lot of money for that, because I'm like, hey, it comes so easily for me. All you got to do is this: just be tenacious, have some resilience, make some calls, make some follow-up calls, just have a customer relationship management software program that you have in place. Those are the things that, that's natural to me. This is the stuff that you got to do in order to make sales. But a lot of people are like, call them and they didn't return my call, so I gave up. Or they didn't say yes, and I got 20 no's, so this isn't working. Yeah, you got 20 no's. You're one step closer to a yes. Keep going. You're almost there.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff. When somebody says to me, how much should I charge for this? I generally are looking at their business plan, the things that they are doing, the process that they put in place, and they're spending too much time getting ready and not enough time doing what they are actually excel at. And so they don't put enough value on the thing that they are really good at and give away or delegate the rest of the stuff. Yes, it means hiring somebody or bringing somebody else in that I'm not good at spreadsheets. So my partner is. When I find myself in a spreadsheet, I find myself wasting my time and not being as effective and hating it all at the same time. So it's a double-edged, horrible sword, that I'm traveling on.
Yeah.
So people are generally not charging enough for their services. Now, I don't want to tell somebody to go from $1,000 to $5,000 overnight, but I do want to tell somebody, you've got to understand you probably are undervaluing what you are doing and spending too much time not doing your gift and spending all of your time getting ready to get ready.
Yeah. Something that you said reminded me of my experience doing door-to-door sales. And I remember you mentioned 20 no's and one yes, and that's a good thing. And I had the mentality normally, it wasn't all the time, I'll be honest, but I had the mentality normally that someone wants this thing that I'm selling.
Yeah.
I just got to find them.
Yeah.
Knock on another door, go to the next house, keep trying. And the point is that I remember always thinking somebody wants this.
Yeah.
And then some days you could get like 99 no's, literally like 100 no's. That's not an exaggeration. You could talk to that many.
Door to door. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. You get slammed on your face, next door, next door, next door. And I remember a couple of guys quit. And one of them said that nobody wants this. And all I remember is, I've never thought nobody wants this. I've only thought somebody wants this. So they're getting discouraged because of the 20 no's or 99 no's, and they're quitting. They're not going to the 100. And sometimes it would take me 100 doors to sell one. And sometimes I would sell the first one, the second one, and the third one. But it's a mentality of somebody wants this versus nobody wants this. And so you're talking about your pricing structure, and you're talking about how you're really good at this sales process, and how we, the listener and you and I, normally would undervalue what we have and charge less for it because we think that it's so easy. Oh, all you got to do is these 7 things and just keep track of them, and that's it. You're done. Then you sell. And somebody else really, really needs that. So, like, if we're struggling through that?
Yeah.
If we're struggling, how does the listener find inside of them
Yeah.
the feeling that says somebody wants this instead of nobody wants this?
Excellent. What a great question, because that really does bring us completely into the podcasting space now. Imagine every guest that queues up for your show, instead of them being a guest on your show, these are people that actually are potentially going to buy or refer you to other people or buy your services themselves. And imagine you could have a pre-qualification application where somebody actually fills out a sheet answering the questions, not as a salesperson prospect relationship, but as a guest interviewee relationship. And you're asking questions about pre-qualifying them for potentially the services that you might consider even selling those people. And imagine them answering all of those questions, and you can go through the application after you receive it, and you can see of the 20 questions, of the 10 questions, of the 5 questions that you ask in your preliminary pre-qualification question, this person answered positively to 4 of the 5 questions, which puts them probably a little closer to wanting your products and services. Imagine not having a podcast relationship with them, but a selling relationship with them where they're actually standing in line waiting to buy your products and services. How much do you think it would build your confidence, instead of having a prospect list of 100 prospects that potentially would want your services, to changing the role and the perspective of this to have 100 people waiting in line to be a guest on your show after they've pre-qualified themselves to be a client of yours also? I don't have a waiting list of 40 or 50 people that want to get on my show. I have a waiting list of 40 or 50 people that are going to become clients of mine. They don't realize it at the point of them filling out the pre-qualification application, but I know it because this is how I've run my show for the last 6 of the 8 years that I've had it. So how much do you think that it would build your confidence knowing that if that person doesn't buy from you, the next person will, or the next person will beyond that? When you have a closing rate of 50 to 80% of the people that you actually put into your guest seat to buy the stuff that you have, not because you're bait and switching them, and not because you're hoodwinking them, or not because you are manipulating their conversation, because genuinely you've pre-qualified them, they're in the guest seat, they have a great message to share with your audience, and they also have a great message to share on your client list, and they are telling you that they want to buy the stuff that you have. How much do you think it would build your confidence if that was the relationship you had with the guests that are sitting in your guest seat?
I've got 3 questions.
Fire away.
And they're going to come after the quick break. But the first one is, what does that prequal look like? So if you could just share with the listener, how do we build this? What does it look like? What are some of the questions that you have?
Yeah.
Second question, how do you find that guest? How do you find that person to fill out the prequal to be a guest on your show and eventually a client? Third was, how is Adam Adams going on your show? If you've got an agency that serves, I've got an agency that serves. So it'd be pretty hard for you to hire me or me to hire you. So how does Adam become one of those people that comes on your show? We'll be right back learning about this prequal and how it works.
Nice.
One sec. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that, like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. We're back with Doug Sandler, the guy who has 8 podcasts, one of them 1,400 episodes, 8 years in the making. And he said before the break that for the last 6 years, he's been doing his podcast a very specific way. And that comes with this prequal. So remember, before the break, I said I was going to ask these 3 questions. Tell us about that prequal letter, because we want to make one just like it. Second, how do you find the guest to fill it out? And third, why was Adam Adams able to come on to your show? So let's find out, what does that prequal look like?
All right. So the answer to the first 2 questions are right under everybody's nose. They just don't realize it because they're thinking too hard. The answer to the first question is, what are the questions that you ask on your pre-qualification application? It's the same answers to the question of what are the questions that you ask to determine if somebody is pre-qualified to buy what you have. Okay. So if you are in the accounting business and you have an accounting podcast and you want to put people that are actually going to become accounting clients, you ask them as a salesperson to a prospect relationship, the question of what's some of the stuff that you are challenged with when it comes to accounting. As a salesperson asking that question to a prospect, what goes up? The wall of I'm going to protect myself because no matter what this person says, they're going to try to sell me into whatever they have because they're asking me a question that's going to determine or ascertain some of my weaknesses that they're going to capitalize on by selling me stuff. That's a salesperson prospect. As an interviewee asking, or an interviewer asking an interviewee that same question, or wanting to get somebody in my guest seat, what is the question I'm going to ask? As it pertains to accounting, what's some of the stuff that you are challenged with? Same question, but I'm asking it as an interviewer asking an interviewee. They don't know that I am a salesperson. They think that I'm an interviewer, and I am an interviewer. I'm listening to them with two ears. Ear one, what answer are they giving me that will best serve and value, and my audience will get the most value of, because that's important in a podcasting space. We are podcasters sharing a message. But the second thing that's important is, are the words that they are saying help guide me to closer to a sale or further away from a sale? And if you have many people that are on that prospect list or filling out those pre-qualification applications, that being one of the questions that you ask, if that person doesn't qualify, it's fine. Just get rid of them. They don't qualify. Sorry, we're filled. But the next person may answer any of the 3 or 4 or 5 questions that are pre-qualifying them with. So it could be things like, what's some of the stuff as it relates to accounting that keeps you up at night? What are some of your initiatives coming up in the next 12 months when it comes to accounting? What are some of the things that you are struggling with when it comes to accounting? The same questions that you would ask as a salesperson prospect, you're asking as an interviewer on that pre-qualification application. Does that make sense, Adam?
Absolutely. So in particular for your podcast,
yeah,
what is 1 or 2 of those questions that you could point out?
Yeah. Have you ever considered starting a podcast?
Okay.
Where are you in your podcast journey? It's like, come on. I ask it in a more bold way now because I generally have 100 people that fill out this application every week that want to get on my show, because I've done a job over the last 8 years of making sure I have enough feeders that are out there, whether it's on social media, with enough publicists, with enough business coaches and consultants. Remember, the other person that's ideal spot for that in that guest seat is a referral base. So those referral people are always giving out my link. You should go on Doug's show. You should go on Doug's show. I've been on Doug's show. You should go there too. So not only do I have social media and my email list that are going out looking for guests, but I have people that are out there because they've been guests and good referral sources. So yeah, I hope that answers your question and that's really clear to your audience as well.
And so how do you find them? I think you already started to answer social media, email, and referrals. How do you find those guests? How does the listener find the right person to fill out their hidden pre-qual form?
All right. So I go back to the original statement that I had. It's right in front of everybody that's out there right now. Where do you look for your prospects now? Are you looking for them on social media? Are you looking for them at a bar? Are you looking for them at networking events? Are you looking for them on email campaigns? Where are you looking for them now? And whatever you're going to do with them as a prospect, why can't you do that? Let me ask you a question, Adam. Let's just go back to the accounting example for a second. If I'm an accountant and you're a potential accounting client based upon some level of knowledge that I may have or may not have about you, but I'm trying to prospect to figure out if you're a potential person. If I ask you the question as a salesperson, hey, Adam, what's some of the stuff that keeps you up at night when it comes to accounting? You know, I'm an accountant. What happens? Do you give me the answer or do you kind of blue sky it?
I would probably not give you the answer. I would, and if I did, I would feel uncomfortable and guarded.
Totally. Okay. But if I said to you, hey, Adam, I was checking your profile out on LinkedIn and I see that you have a tech firm. Would you be open to sharing your business philosophy and your strategies and your message with my podcast audience at a podcast interview? Would you be open to that?
Sure. I would love that.
Okay. All of a sudden, now I've got a guy that I think is pre-qualified that hasn't now protected himself because I'm not a salesperson anymore. I'm an interviewer. I'm a podcast. I'm a media company. Yeah. And I'm saying, hey, Adam, would you be open to coming on my show and sharing your message and what you do with my audience? I think there could be some value out of that for all of us.
Yeah.
You're going to say yes.
I completely agree. I love that because one way I choked up, like I was physically choking up, like not crying choke up, but I don't want to talk. That's how my body was like, I don't want to say, like, I don't want to answer that. And the other way, I'm like, hell yeah, I'll do
Hell
that.
yeah. You are not just a yes, but you're a hell yes. Now, let me tell you the purpose of that. What happens when you now get on my show? I'm able to ask you questions as an interviewer that are going to elicit answers from you that you wouldn't necessarily give me as a salesperson. My audience is gaining value from it also, because in the accounting world, maybe you're doing something that they would want to hear about. And my business and your business will benefit from it, because now you're serving my market, my audience. I'm serving potentially you, and I'm serving my audience too. It's like a triangle of win. Everybody walks away happy. Now, here's the key to making this successful. Don't be a dick if this person doesn't give you the answers that help lead them down the sales path. Don't be a bait and switch and try to jam a product or service, or don't jam your services down their throat as soon as they tell you anything that would help you understand that probably they would benefit. You don't have to hurry. I have 6, 8, 12 weeks before that episode comes out. I have plenty of time to build the relationship, even outside of the guest seat. And the last thing that you want to be is take this strategy that we use and create a bad name with it by, oh yeah, I got on a show and all he tried to do was sell me. I really do know that as a guest that you're going to provide value to my audience. I'm going to provide value to you and my audience. Why do I need to force that?
I have one guest in mind. I don't want to name his name on the podcast, but I will say he was that bait and switch that you could tell that there was nothing except for him interviewing you to sell you. So Doug, I'm really enjoying, and I think that it's good for the listener to hear the difference between you and him. For example, the difference between somebody who is going to build a relationship, who's going to add value to the guest, who's going to add value to the listener, and who's going to let and play the long game. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, but you start with the value.
Totally.
Whereas if this other gentleman was all about sales, and you could tell from the beginning. And so it's just refreshing to hear that. And I hope that the listener's picking up on that balance of doing it, but doing it with the right intentions and the right way that it's going to get a good result, and not, you mentioned putting up a wall, a way that they don't have to put up the wall because of the approach that you have.
Well, just because I have an accelerator pedal doesn't mean it has to be to the floor all the time. You know, I have a brake and I have a clutch. So let's use all of those things equally and get a good balance, not only out of my audience. Now, my audience who's been with me in some cases for many, many years, they would know if I'm a dick. It's like they're going to hear it and they would probably protest. And I would protest too, because I've had guests that have come on the show that as the host, they've tried to go the other way. They've tried to sell me services too. I'm like, hey, look, dude, I appreciate you sharing this, but this isn't the time or the place. And you're jamming your services into my client, into my audience's ear too. They don't trust you. Let me do the selling for you. I've had to physically stop my recordings and I've had to say, stop selling. Please, this will be a really great relationship if you just let me sell my audience who trusts me already and give them the proper information. You don't have to sell. This episode is going to exist for many, many years after you're off the show. Let's do it the right way.
Yeah. I want that to sink in. So that's good stuff. So the first one, what does the pre-qual look like? You answered. The second one, how do you find the guest? You told us where to find them, him or her.
Yep.
And third, if you have a podcast production service and I have a podcast production service, I don't think be the first choice of a client for you. And it seems like you're using the pre-qual as somebody who would be a good client. So how did I make the cut?
Okay, another great question. And again, obvious to me because I've been doing it a long time, not obvious to your listeners, maybe not even to you. But the reality of it is that if I looked at my list, and let's just say there's 10,000 people on my list, that's not the accurate number. There might be less, there might be more. It doesn't really matter. I don't even know how many people are on my list. Doesn't even matter. 10,000 people on my list. How many people typically buy from your list? 1%? 2%? Maybe, if we're lucky?
I was having 6-ish thousand on our list for a long time, and I would say about 10%.
Great. So you have a better, more active, more engaged list that actually has a higher chance of conversion. The challenge with that is that you have 10% that buy, which means you have 90% that don't. Now, Does that mean that at some point they will? Maybe. Does that mean that if you shared that, I'm not asking for this, but if you shared that list with somebody that does exactly what you do, there's an opportunity for you to make money because they relate to me differently than they relate to you, or maybe the level of service or the type of service or the cost of the service or how you deliver the service or the type of people that are on your team. Any of those things might be more attractive to them.
I think I'm getting it. I think I understand. I think what you're saying is Adam's got an approach. Maybe out of 3,500 listeners, maybe less than 1%, probably 0.3. You mentioned that number before.
Right.
Maybe 0.3 are calling us and hiring us. And that means that 99.7 don't call and hire me.
It's obvious now.
And so maybe Doug Sandler's the right fit for my audience and vice versa.
Maybe you and I working together on both of our combined lists, the whole is greater than the sum of both parts. Maybe that's a more effective way for us to work our list together. Or maybe we brainstorm and come up with a program that's even better than what each of us has individually. And we keep our individual businesses, but we present a program to our audiences or our members that are list holders or people that are on our list that would be more attractive. That's the kind of stuff that gets me excited, because my best friend, his name is Michael Neeley, and Michael has another company that's called PodQuest. He does exactly what I do. Now, how is it that two guys can coexist as best friends? The reason we do is because we know that 99% of our people are not going to buy from us. So let's do something together. That guest seat is good for guests turning into clients, guests turning into referrals, guests turning into affiliates, guests turning into joint venture partners, and guests falling into that category of, geez, Adam, I don't really know where we work well together, but would it be worth a 30-minute call to go exploring? And that's the true blood of what an entrepreneur is all about. So that's why when I heard that I had an opportunity to come on your show, I'm like, oh, he does exactly what I do. Cool. It wasn't, he does what I do. Let me try to figure out where I can loophole everything, get his, you keep your business. That's totally cool. There's enough room for all of us in this world.
Agreed. I like that mentality of that there is enough room, because there's a lot of people that have businesses about podcasting and they will not have somebody on their show who also does it. They don't want to have that competition. They feel like that will take away from them. And sounds like you and I just don't follow that. You and I feel like the world is big and open and we're all going to be fine. And the way that they feel is, I have to block everybody out and put everybody down and not put a spotlight on anyone else who does something like me.
Well, it's the difference between having a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. I just have an abundance mindset. I'm like, I know that we could probably do something great together. Given enough time and opportunity and discussion, we would find something. Whether we're both going to decide to do that, that's a different story. But I know that if I sit with somebody long enough, we're going to figure out an idea together that's going to work for both of us. As long as we both approach this with the attitude of, how can I serve him first? It works. You know, joint venture is a game of I'll go first, my friend Jay Fazette says, and it's very true. Joint venture opportunities is, let me show you what I can do for you before you have to show me any value. And if we both take that mentality, man, we're both going to serve each other's markets pretty well.
Yeah. I think that the listener got a lot out of today, this interview with you. I know that I did, and I'll share a few takeaways. One of which is how frequently community and relationships come up with you. Toward the very beginning of the episode, you talked about how there's 3 reasons that we start a podcast. One is community, one's influence, and one's money. Later, you mentioned that the real gold in podcasting is the relationships that you build with your guest, regardless if they can buy from you, I'll say.
Totally.
And as the interview went on, you talked more about how to do like the prequal, finding the guest, why you got me on. And last, it ends up with relationships again, because the reason that you have me on is because it goes back down to what I think is probably your company culture. And that is about relationships, is about building the relationships and not rushing it. And like you mentioned a second ago, giving before you receive in joint ventures. You quoted somebody. But I'm hearing you say, Adam and I can connect. You never know what's going to happen. Have an abundance mentality for sure. But once we connect, it's like, Adam might help me this. I might help Adam do this. We might joint venture on this. We might share our list with each other. And it's just like, let's start with a relationship. And I think that's a really big place for us to have as a takeaway. Another thing that I got from you, and it comes down to your cars, which I think are write-offs, your dates, which might be write-offs. We'll ask our CPA. And then the wine and the wine trips and the tastings and the Napa and the Sonoma. And if you go to Burgundy or Loire or wherever, somewhere else in another country, you might be able to write that off because you got that podcast. And it was kind of cool to hear that not only did you get those tasting fees, the $75 or $400 tasting fee waived, but you also might have got a free bottle or two because of that confidence.
Many.
Another takeaway. I loved that you mentioned narrowcasting and niching down, because I think that the listener needs to do that. And we talked about how to optimize multiple podcasts or keep the same podcast for 8 years. It comes down to hiring the right team. And you mentioned that some of us are worried about that. So another great takeaway, I've got so many. Mom, market, offer, and message. So when we're thinking about how to price ourselves, when we're figuring out how to figure out like what we could do on our podcast, the content, we always think about the MOM, market, offer, and messaging. I love the takeaway that I got about the hidden questionnaire, which I used to do more on my real estate podcast, and maybe I ought to do on the podcast on podcasting, this show. Lots and lots of things. And then the last couple is number one, what answer will help? You said you listen with 2 ears. This is one of my favorite parts. You're listening to your guest intentionally to say, how does this help my listener, my audience, my listener, the person on the other end? And secondarily, are they answering it toward or away from a sale for me? So it's like, I'm noticing this about them. I'm noticing this about what they're saying. And maybe at the end of the episode, you ask them. And that's where I want to finish today's episode, is after listening with 2 ears, one for how to help the listener, one for how to help your business, if you will. And the guest, if they become a client, they're being helped as well. But like, what do you do with that information that you're armed with? When do you talk to them? That's a question I think that the listener has, and we'll end there.
All right. So there's a couple times where there's opportunity for you to chat with that guest. One is right after the interview is over. If you get really good at it, you can do it while you're still actually in the interview. I've done that many times with my guests because I'm in the podcast business. It's a little bit meta. They're coming onto a podcast, so we're talking about podcasting sometimes. But I may be able to say to a guest as they're sitting in that guest seat, I got to ask you something, Adam. You know, we've spent the last 30 minutes talking about marketing and your initiatives for 2023 that's coming up, or 2024. Why the hell don't you have a podcast? And I just shut up and I let them talk about why they don't, or they thought about, or they're thinking about, or they're going to, or they've started and stopped, or the technical problems, or the personality issues, or interview things, or community, all the stuff that gets in people's way, why they don't have a podcast. I'm just listening. That's one. The second opportunity is, now keep in mind, we have many opportunities as podcasters when that episode is either in production, in editing, it just came out, we're now 30 days out, opportunities for you to say to them, hey, the stuff that we talked about on the show, the episode airs. I'm excited to be able to share the link with you. Question, ... That stuff that we talked about as I'm listening back about accounting, was that real world? Are those still issues that you're dealing with? I don't know if you know, but that's what I do for a living. Would you be open to having a follow-up conversation?
Okay.
You know, now we're 20 days out, interviews out. We've gotten some good feedback from our audience. Hey, we're getting great feedback. Curious. That stuff that we talked about on the show, it's still going on, ... Set up an appointment. Let's talk about it. They want to be friends because you don't approach this like you have something to sell to them. You're more of a problem solver for them. And they see that. They know that you're not jamming your services down their throat.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Doug. And Doug has sent me, or is in the process of sending me, all of these different podcasts, because if you're curious and you want to find them easy, we'll just link them.
Yeah.
So his company, it's in the show notes. His bio, so you can read more about him, is in the show notes. The website, all of the podcasts. You want to find Doug, his social, that stuff's already in the show notes. Go ahead and scroll down, connect with him. And remember that every other episode is a solo episode, and I've got something ready and queued up for you in the very next episode. So don't even go anywhere. I'll see you there. If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of three things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.